Now let's make the hands. Let's select the blanks we have already created with Alt-click. Our subtool should become active in the subtool list. Let's drag it to the very top for our convenience. Also, it would be way more convenient for us to work with only one hand at once. So using the shortcut X, turn off the symmetry. After that, use the key combination Ctrl or Command Shift to isolate one hand. Now in the tab Geometry, Modify Topology, click Del Hidden button. Let's add one more cylinder. In the Subtool tab, click Append and add a cylinder. New objects are provided in the end of the list. I select this subtool and drag it upward, and position it right underneath the hand. We'll use this cylinder to make a finger. I just scale it and move it using Transpose tool and make it as long as the palm is. Because in terms of the proportions, fingers are usually as long as the palm. Concerning the thickness, I'll use reference. I'll make it approximate. Now I want to unite these two subtools into one subtool. To do this, select the hand subtool and make sure that the finger subtool is right underneath the hand. Open the folder Merge and click Merge Down. Now they constitute one subtool. But I want these two objects to have different polygroups. In my case, they are different anyway. But if in your case they are the same, you can open the tab Polygroups and click on the Auto Groups button. Now, using the Transpose tool, keeping Ctrl or Command on Mac pressed, you can mask specific parts. Now, using the tools we have already learned, such as Transpose, Move, and Smooth, I'll adjust the hand's shape. I sometimes quit the solo mode to see how the hand looks with the whole character. Now I'll unmask the finger and slightly edit its shape. For now, we'll work only with one finger, and later I'll just copy it. Also, I'll mainly use Move, Smooth, and Transpose tools. Please pay attention to the fact that when you use Smooth, the volume decreases. And it would be really good to have a tool to increase the volume of the finger. The Inflate brush is perfect for this. The shortcut is BIN. It just moves the points perpendicularly to the surface. In this way, it creates the inflation effect. It's extremely convenient for working with such thin objects as fingers, horns, or different ropes. It's usually used in combination with Smooth and Move. If you look carefully at the topology of this finger, you can notice that the polygons are now too stretched out. Also, we have these poles, which aren't too convenient for sculpting. And we would want to have a possibility to quickly change this topology. In this case, Z-Remesher is perfect. Open the Geometry tab, find Z-Remesher. If you click on this button, ZBrush will analyze the surface and will automatically create the new topology. Now the mesh has become more even, but it seems to be too dense. So I'll cancel the changes for now, and here we can change the number of polygons. I significantly decrease their number and press this button again. Now I like the evenness and density of the mesh. Again, I open the Polygroups tab and click Auto Groups to restore the ability to select the finger separately. I'll edit this finger a little bit more. Next, using the Transpose tool with the Ctrl or Command key on Mac pressed, I copy it twice. Let me remind you that you can move Gizmo with the pressed Alt key. For now, I keep a quite big distance between the fingers to make it easier to work with them. I click Auto Groups one more time, so all fingers have different polygroups. Now I copy the finger one more time to make a thumb. I'll use the same tools to shape it. Now let's look at how it combines with the whole character. Now I want to unite all surfaces of fingers and palm into one surface. If I use Z remesher for this, it will just recalculate the new topology for each specific surface. ZBrush offers one more way for retopologizing called Dynamesh. Go to the Dynamesh tab and click on the button. Dynamesh describes the surface way worse than Z remesher. It's because it works not with the surface but with the volume. But thanks to that, it glues different surfaces together. If we cancel the change and increase the resolution, the effect will be way better. The most important thing is to find such a resolution when the mesh is not too dense, but dense enough to prevent losing the details. For example, if we decrease the resolution, you can see that the artifacts appear. If the resolution is too high, it'll be inconvenient for us to work with such a mesh. I like the mesh density like this. I also use the shortcut Control or Command W to make one polygroup for the whole mesh. Now I'll show you several new brushes. One of the most popular brushes is the clay buildup brush. The shortcut is BCB. This brush is really convenient for adding or removing volume. For instance, here I want to add the flexor for the thumb, but it's a quite rough brush. I usually use it together with smooth. I simply add some volume and after that smooth it. If you keep Alt pressed, you'll detract the volume. In a similar way, I add volume on the other side. One more popular brush is Dam Standard. The shortcut is BDS. It's convenient for notching such trenches and stressing such junctions. If you press Alt, it will not notch such trenches, but extrude them. In this way, you can make pointed corners. One more brush I use all the time is Trim Dynamic. The shortcut is BTD. It enables to make the surface more dense. It feels like cutting plasticine with a knife. Further on, I'll use the combination of all these brushes to adjust the hand's shape. Here I use clay buildup just to add some volume to the junction between the fingers and the palm. Also, a bit for the knuckles. It's better not to misuse the smooth brush, because it greatly reduces the volume and hardly deforms the surface. For example, thin objects such as fingers may become even thinner. In this panel, you can see the list of materials. When I sculpt, I constantly change materials, because in different materials, the shape looks slightly different. And also, if you're stuck, a change refreshes your shape perception. I think this degree of detailing is enough. But right now, the hand looks crumpled and unfinished. But it's just an interim topology created with Dynamesh. After applying any retopology, these details will disappear. To do this, we can use Z-remesher one more time. I'll try to apply the number of polygons I already have. I don't really like this mesh. I'll just move this slider and try to find the number at which the mesh will look good. I generally like this topology. It's quite even and way less dense than it was. With such a mesh, it's much easier to adjust the bigger shapes. It's more convenient to use Move Topological instead of Move Brush. Let me remind you of the shortcut. It's BMT. Let's look at how the hand looks with the character. Now let's copy and mirror the hand. To do this, go to the tab Modify Topology and click Mirror and Weld. Don't forget to turn on the symmetry using the X shortcut. I want to slightly adjust the position of the hands. Maybe make them smaller and rotate them. Now let's attach the hands to the chest. To do this, find the hands and the chest in the list and make sure that they are located next to one another. Next, select the upper object, in my case it's the chest, and click Merge Down. When you merge subtools, you should always be careful, because this operation is irreversible. Now it's one object, and I want to use Dynamesh to merge them into one surface. To do this, I go to the Geometry tab, select the resolution, and click Dynamesh. It seems to me that the polygons are too big. I slightly increased the resolution, and now I'll use the same brushes. To begin with, I'll smooth these polygons. Here I use clay buildup to add some volume around the shoulders. And also to add the lats. Sometimes it's more convenient to use the move brush. Here I use the shortcut Shift-Z to turn on the spotlight because I want to compare the shoulder's silhouette. I want to make the biceps bigger. To do this, I use the move brush and inflate. I use clay buildup to shape the elbow. I just add some volume and close these gaps on the sides. And after that, I use smooth. Here I use Dam Standard to slightly stress these junctures. Let's also merge the pelvis and the legs. Firstly, find them in the subtool list and place them next to each other. I'll again use merge down to first connect the pelvis to the legs, and after that to connect it to the upper body part. Now go back to the Geometry tab and try applying Dynamesh. It seems that the resolution is too low, so that's why I increase it. This seems enough. Here I won't sculpt that much. I'll just smooth the polygons. I'll inspect the whole model, in particular the areas that could have been damaged due to Dynamesh. In order to prevent damping the topology of the hands, I won't merge them with the body. The same concerns the head. The head details are small, so the mesh is denser too. Let's compare it with the reference one more time. Generally, I like everything, so we can proceed with the face of this character. The face is super easy from the geometry point of view. First of all, I want to compare it with the reference to find the approximate position for the eyes. For the eyes, we'll use spheres. So click on Append and add a sphere. It will appear in the end of the list. Scale it and position it approximately in the place where eyes should be. To copy and mirror it, on the tab Geometry, Modify Topology, click Mirror and Weld. Don't forget turning on the symmetry by pressing the X key. Now let's copy the eyes to create eyelids. To do this, just find them in the subtool list and click Duplicate. You could have noticed that in the symmetry mode, when you scale the object, it scales relatively to the symmetry center. If you want it to scale relatively to the gizmo, click on this button, Local Symmetry. Let's make the spheres a bit bigger. Not too much, just to reflect the eyelid thickness. You should remember that if you keep Ctrl or Command Shift and select the geometry, you can isolate a part of the polygons in this way. In this mode, besides isolating polygons, you can also do other things. Press Ctrl or Command Shift and open the Brushes menu and select Trim Rectangle. Now using this tool, you can cut off geometry parts and the topology will be generated automatically. Let's rotate this object and use it for the upper eyelid. After that, duplicate this subtool and use it to create the lower eyelid. Next, you can join these two objects using Merge Down. I want to scale them a little bit, because the lids seem to be too thick. And I also want to make the retopology. In this case, it will be convenient first to apply Dynamesh to merge the eyelids into one object. The most important thing is to set a rather high resolution of the grid to preserve the ridges. After that, you can use Z-remesher, but I'll decrease the number of polygons. I'll rotate them a little and position. Now I want to detail the ear. Let's select the ear and investigate its topology. Right now, it is absolutely inconvenient for sculpting, so that's why I'll use Dynamesh. The most important thing is to set high resolution, and for sculpting, I'll use all the same brushes. Mainly clay buildup, move, smooth, and sometimes inflate. At this point, I use Z-remesher to ensure that the ear has a smoother topology, and I'll slightly adjust its shape. Now let's add a cylinder and use it to make a nose. I'll rotate it by this angle, like this. And I'll use trim rectangle to get approximately the shape like this. And I'll cut it also on the internal side, so there are no unnecessary details. I use Z-remesher to create the interim topology. Here I keep a high number of polygons to enable sculpting, and slightly adjust the shape. I want to adjust the shape of the head. I use Z remesher to make the detailing finer. It isn't the final nose topology yet, but I'll create the nostrils to understand the proportions. To do this, I use clay buildup with the Alt key. It's more convenient to create some types of geometry in Cinema or in other 3D editors. So that's why I'll show you how to import and export the geometry on the example of the hair. First of all, I'll select the body subtool and click Export. I'll use the OBJ format because it works in almost all 3D editors. I'll name the file PartyMaker Export and click Save. Now we can open Cinema and add the file there right from the folder. Keep the standard import settings and click OK. The geometry should open, and the first thing you could have noticed is that if you select the object, you see that it's really small. Its size is only 1 centimeter. For Cinema, it's too small of a scale. If I create the standard cube, it will be gigantic. ZBrush doesn't feature an intuitive system of sizes, and in different cases, the solution to this problem is different. In this case, you can open the tab Export and see the scale slider. It increases the size of the geometry you export. In the case with Cinema, almost always the size 100 works perfectly. But with other software, you'll need to experiment and find the right value. And now click Export one more time. I'll substitute the same file and add it into Cinema one more time. Now we see that the size is right. The second thing you could have noticed is that only one exported subtool is exported. To export several subtools, in the menu, find Z plugin, and in the list, find Subtool Master. Click Export. Here you can see some settings. Make sure that the format is set to OBJ, and click OK. I select the same file. ZBrush will take some time to load. Now add this file into Cinema, and this time we see that all subtools were uploaded. The only problem is that now they're all in one object, but in this case it isn't that important. You can simply change the settings when exporting it from Subtool Master. I want to style the character's hair, and in this case I see that hair may be created using spheres. We could add a sphere or copy the existing head part and copy everything like that manually. It takes quite a lot of time, so we can use Cinema 4D to speed this process up. Cloner is perfect for this task. First, we need to separate the head of hair from our object. To do this, let's select the object and in the Polygons mode, double-click on any polygon of the head of the hair. In this way, we select all connected polygons. Now press Ctrl or Command X to cut the polygons. Remove selection and press Ctrl or Command V to create a new object from these polygons. I'll rename it to Hair. Now create a cloner. You can find it on this panel. We want to lay out the sphere, so let's create a sphere. I'll make it smaller right away. And to understand what the size of the sphere should be, the best thing to do is to look at the reference. I see that here the large ringlets are twice as big as the eye is. I can use the eye for guidance. Something like this. Now move the sphere and make it a daughter to Cloner. In Cloner Attributes, change the mode to Object. After that, select the object on whose surface you want to place the spheres. In this case, it's hair. Also, I want to change the sphere's topology a little to ensure that the polygons are square and easily smoothed. To do this, I select the hexahedron type. Now let's increase their number. To do this, select the cloner and in the Object tab, find Count. The shape of your blank may be different. Respectively, the number may be different too. In this case, just rotate it to visually ensure that they are not situated too close to one another. You can also rotate C to change the random positions and to add more randomness to their locations. Let's create a random effector. In my case, it immediately influenced the cloner. But if in your case it didn't, make sure that the random effector is added to the list of effectors in the cloner. You can add it simply by dragging. Let's select the random effector and look at its settings. Now position is turned on by default. It's exactly what we need. The only thing is that I want to decrease these values a little, so that the dispersion isn't so extensive. I also want to add some randomness to the size. I tick Uniform Scale to scale the objects on all axes at once. I'll adjust the scale a bit more. And also the number of spheres and the seed of the cloner to get the effect similar to the hair in the reference. In the cloner settings, you can change the mode to volume. Then the spheres will be placed within the hair volume. I like this positioning. Now we can convert these spheres into geometry. To do this, right-click on the cloner and select Connect Objects. You should get an object consisting of the spheres glued into one geometry. To export it, you should either delete all objects besides this one, or you can simply copy it by pressing Ctrl or Command C. After that, create a new project and paste it by pressing Ctrl or Command V. Now you can export it. To do this, click on File, Export, and select OBJ. It's crucial for the settings to be the same as they were when it was imported. I'll call this file hair. Let's go back to ZBrush, and before importing, it's really important to either create a new subtool or copy an existing one. I'll just copy the head of hair. Now when we click Import and select our hair file, it will completely substitute the selected subtool. So when you import, you should remember to select the unnecessary subtool to ensure that you don't delete anything important. I want to slightly adjust the head of hair. I'll hide the old blank. To adjust the overall silhouette, you can use Move with big radius. For more detailed editing, you can use Move Topological. It will apply only to individual spheres, but if the radius is too small, the spheres will be deformed. You can increase the radius to the maximum. Then using Move Topological, it will be convenient to display these spheres. If you want to acquire even more control, you can use polygroups. To do this, on this Tools panel, find Polygroups and click on the Auto Groups button. Now you can use Transpose tool, and keeping Control or Command on Mac pressed, you can mask individual spheres and after that scale, displace, and do anything you want with it. Right now I'll speed up the video because I'm just going to be adjusting these spheres and shaping them. Here, I'll simply draw them apart using Move Topological to make the ears visible and shape the fringe. I'm generally satisfied with the silhouette. Now I want to create the bird, because the bird is a part of the hairstyle. It will be a quite simple model. I'll just add a sphere using Append. I place it approximately at the place where it should be, and using the Move brush, I form an ovoid shape. I use Z-remesher to slightly reduce the number of polygons. I add one more sphere to make an eye. Right now, it's hard to differentiate between the bird and the hare, so I temporarily move them aside. To create the beak, I copy the eye subtool and cut off half of it using trim rectangle. Let me remind you that you can access this tool by keeping Ctrl or Command Shift pressed. To create the bottom beak part, I'll simply copy the upper part by clicking on Duplicate. Now when the bird is ready, let's add some color to differentiate it from the hare. Right now the geometry isn't colored. That is why when we select a color on this panel, the whole model changes its color. To quickly change the color of one subtool, select the necessary subtool. In this case, I've selected the hare, and in the Color tab, click Fill Object. Now the information about the color is saved at every point of the subtool, and that's why when we change the color, it stays the same. I'll also color the bird white. Now it isn't that noticeable. Also, I want to change the material to a more neutral one, and change the color of the remaining subtools in the same way. I simply select the subtool, pick a color, and click Fill Object. Now I proceed with adjusting the bird's position and slightly edit the hairstyle. For the hairstyle, I'll use mainly Move Topological. To make a mouth, let's add the object Ring 3D. I color it to the hair color right away. To avoid picking it manually, you can hover over the hair and press C. After that, don't forget to open the menu, Color, and click Fill Object. Now I position the ring like this. It's obvious that to make the shape like this character's mouth is, it's way more convenient to use splines in Cinema 4D. But when you work in ZBrush on the sketching stage, it's sometimes ineffective to switch between the software, and you should make up different tricks, especially when you work with such thin stretched out objects. First of all, I mask exactly half of this ring and stretch it like this. Now I want to make the object symmetrical. To do this, on the Modify Topology tab, I use Mirror and Weld. After that, I activate the symmetry using the shortcut X, and expand it a bit more and position it in the mouse area. The idea is that right now this thing looks like a deflated balloon. If we inflate it, we'll get the mouth we need. For now, it's more convenient for us to edit it in a deflated condition. I also want to bend the mouth, but we lack polygons in the middle. To add them, I use Z Remesher. And to inflate it, it's convenient to use the Inflate tool. To bend the mouth, I'll use the Transpose tool. Click this gear icon to use Bend Arch modifier, and drag the green arrow to bend it on the right axis. Next, using Move, Smooth, and Inflate, I'll adjust the shape of the mouth. Now, when I have the mouth, I want to adjust the eyes, ears, and everything around them. Here I have just merged the subtools of the eyes and eyelids and made them smaller. Also, I want to slightly adjust the shape of the head. Let's add some details to the roller skates. Currently, they have a really bad topology. That's why, firstly, I apply Dynamesh and will adjust the shape using already learned tools. I slightly smooth the irregularities. For this, I use the Move tool. I use Mask to highlight these upper parts. I slightly blur the mask on the masking panel using the Transpose tool to create such an elevation in the ankle area. After that, the grid may be too deformed. That's why I apply Dynamesh one more time. When I'm generally quite satisfied with the overall shape, I use Z Remesher to reduce the number of polygons. I'll select the value at which there aren't too many polygons, but at the same time enough of them to describe the shape. After that, I adjust the shape more accurately. Let's add shoelaces. To do this, create any subtool. You should necessarily make it active on the subtool list and find the Initialize panel. If you click on any of these buttons, a primitive will be created and it will substitute the subtool you have selected. Let's create a blank for a shoelace. Set the resolution to 822 and click Q Cube. You should get such an object. Let's move it to the foot area and shape the laces. I'll simply flatten it vertically and make it a bit smaller. Right now it's just a rectangle. I want to see how it looks smoothed. Click on the D key and turn on Dynamic Smoothing. It's almost identical to Subdivision Surface in Cinema 4D. If you turn on the grid display, you'll see that the initial geometry isn't destroyed and you can adjust it. You can press Shift-D to turn off the dynamic smoothing. Let's use the Transpose tool and select the Bend Arch modifier. It's ideal here to bend the lace to match the boot's shape. I position the shoelace like this. Now, keeping Control or Command on Mac pressed, I use the Transpose tool to copy this object twice. To make the selection of different laces more convenient, in the Polygroups panel, I click Auto Groups. Next, I adjust the shape of the shoelaces using Move Topological, Transpose tool, and other tools we have learned. And I also change the colors for better visibility. Now let's mirror the laces. To do this, on the Geometry tab, Modify Topology, click Mirror and Weld. It's crucial to make sure that local symmetry is turned off. Let's add socks. I think that in this case, it will be the most convenient to use sort of cracknels for socks. ZBrush features a suitable primitive called Ring3D. Later, we'll make a really good topology, so there is no sense in retopologizing such simple objects like this one. So it's better to make their topology properly from the very beginning. The problem is that if you click Append in ZBrush, this object is imported in a form of polygons. We have no possibility to change the number of polygons on this object, so let's for now delete this subtool. And first of all, we need to create a new separate subtool. To do this, click on this window and select Ring3D. We have created a tool with one subtool inside. You may remember that if we now select the Sculpting tool and try sculpting, we get such a notification. It means that right now the subtool isn't Polymesh 3D, but a primitive. Also, you could have noticed that this list has become way shorter. Now if you go to the tab Initialize, you'll find the settings of this primitive. You can apply it to both Ring3D and to other primitives. For example, sphere, cube, and so on. For now, I keep the default settings. I change S-radius to make its proportions similar to this part of the sock. I also change S-divide to 16 and L-divide to 32. After that, I convert the object to Polymesh 3D. To do this, I simply click the Make Polymesh 3D button. Now, keeping Control or Command pressed, I change the mask selection to Circle and select these central polygons. After that, I click Control or Command W to separate polygroup from the masked polygons. After that, I isolate all, besides these inside polygons. I just want to delete them, because this area will be hidden inside the leg anyway. It will make the future UV unwrap easier. By the way, if you want to make the underside of polygons visible, on the Display Properties tab, click Double. Now the central polygons aren't deleted yet, they're just hidden, and to delete them, open the Geometry, Modify Topology, and click Delete Hidden. Now we can use the subtool to create the sock. Right now it's here in the list. To make it easier to find, you can rename it. You can do it in the subtool panel. Now let's return to the tool with our character. Click Append and find the renamed tool in the list. After that, we can use the Transpose tool to position it in the sock area, and adjust it to the reference shape using sculpting tools. I copy it several times by pressing Ctrl or Command on Mac. And also, on the Polygons tab, I click Auto Groups to make the selection of separate pieces easier. I'll slightly crumple them to make them less symmetrical. It will add cartoon carelessness and realism. Now, in the Geometry tab, Modify Topology, I click Mirror and Weld to copy the sock. This time I won't use symmetry. I'll crumple it a bit more, so it looks slightly different. It will also contribute to realism. Also, you can change the color and compare it with the reference. Overall, the character is ready for retopologizing. I will also adjust some places. For example, these wrist areas seem to me too thick. It would be way easier to make clothes and other details such as sweatbands after retopologizing.